As you all know, here in the United States, there's been much debate about restructuring the ATC system. Many of the ideas for such a restructuring point to elements of NAV Canada and the privately run, not-for-profit corporation that operates Canada's national air system. No matter where you stand on this conversation, I think we can all agree that our aviation system does need technological upgrades, and our next speaker can certainly provide some perspective on that issue. He's the president and CEO of NAV Canada, Mr. Neil Wilson. We're very, very pleased that he's taken time for his busy schedule to come here and speak with us today. And while he's only been in that position since January of this year, Neil has been with NAV Canada since 2002. Given that NAV Canada began in 1996, he's been with that organization for most of his existence. He's here today to not only talk about restructuring, but also other areas of importance that affect Canadian airspace and our Canadian airlines. So please, a warm welcome for Mr. Neil Wilson.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks very much for that invitation. Much appreciated. And thanks, Tim, and to all the staff here at ALPA for the very kind invitation to be here today. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde, as we say in Canada's other official language. If we're going to do questions later, that's the extent of the French. But it is indeed a very distinct pleasure to be here talking aviation safety with such a dedicated group of industry professionals. After 85 years representing airline pilots around the world, it's clear that ALPA is more relevant and more important than ever. And Tim, I'd like to thank you and ALPA for your ongoing support of the space-based ADS-B initiative that we're involved with its emphasis on safety and operational benefits, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later. As I look at the materials and listen to what's been said over the last day and a half thus far, and I look at ALPA's communications, it reminds us all that the airline industry has made enormous strides in operational safety during this first decade of the 21st century. And that safety dividend, which we have seen from all of our investments in people and technology, is truly impressive. But, of course, there's more to do. And ALPA, quite correctly, emphasizes an approach to safety that is data-driven rather than headline-driven. And so today I want to emulate that approach, and I'm going to try and leave you not with headlines, but with some, what I hope will be useful insights on the challenges and opportunities that we've addressed and those which we all face over the coming years. At NAV Canada, 2016 marks two milestones for us, one for the company and one for me. On November 1st of this year, we will celebrate our 20th anniversary as the owner and operator of Canada's Civil Air Navigation System, or ANS. And not long after that, I'm going to complete my first year as the company's president and CEO. A top priority during the year has been renewing our external connections. And I can say that our connection with ALPA is one of the strongest. At the working level, there's no relationship more important than the collaboration between an air traffic controller or flight service specialist and the pilot of an aircraft. And this point is well known to all of us. It's illustrated by many stories we all know. One I'm aware of from recently was the work of one of our own air traffic controllers, Anne Breen, who works out of the Vancouver Area Control Center and is also a pilot. But in December, she was providing control service to a local commercial flight from Nanaimo to Abbotsford, British Columbia. And the pilot was flying in poor weather conditions when he reported an engine failure, requested a return to Nanaimo. The ceiling was low. He needed vectors for an ILS approach. And at that point, Anne realized the pilot was having great difficulty maintaining the altitude and the heading that had been assigned and was essentially flying into the higher terrain. And in her very composed and professional manner, she provided very timely instructions that allowed that pilot to steer the aircraft away from the hills and out of danger. And I share this story, and we know the stories similar to this, but I share it because it exemplifies why we're all here today. Because no matter where we work in the industry, we all care passionately about air safety. It's not just our business, it's what we live and breathe every day. So with that perspective in mind, I'd like to share with you a little bit of a background to the NAV Canada story, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. Then I want to touch on some of our current safety and service initiatives, And finally, I'm going to look forward to the future, to new technology, and in particular space-based ADS-B, which promises to revolutionize global air traffic surveillance and safety. So, some basic NAV Canada facts. We are the world's second largest air navigation system, or ANS, by traffic volume. I think you all know, being here in Washington, which ANSP handles the most traffic, but we're fine with second position when it comes to that, because after all, we are responsible for some 18 million square kilometers of airspace from Vancouver Island in the west to the oceanic airspace out over the North Atlantic, from Point Pelee in southern Ontario all the way to the North Pole. And much of this airspace is at the crossroads of global aviation, with flight paths linking North America, Europe, and the Asia-Pacific region. Our services include air traffic control, flight information, weather briefings, aeronautical information management, and of course electronic aids to navigation. We operate out of 7 area control centers, 41 control towers, over 60 flight service stations and flight information centers, 51 community aerodrome radio stations in the north of Canada, all supported by 4,700 really terrific employees. And one of the benefits of managing this very vast airspace that we have in Canada is that it challenges us to do better, to keep striving to conquer distance, geography, and climate. So, for example, the controllers and flight service specialists in Gander, Newfoundland, have an enviable record of providing first-rate safety and service to customers who fly the North Atlantic, the busiest and densest oceanic airspace in the world. And not surprisingly, the oceanic air traffic system they operate is one of the most advanced of its kind in the world. As for the north, in Canada, the growth in polar routes over the past 15 years has been significant, going from about 1,000 flights in the year 2000 to over 14,000 in the year 2015. Even though we're marking our 20th anniversary this November, the history of NAV Canada goes back before then, and I was privileged to be able to be involved in the formation of NAV Canada back in the early 1990s, when we did effect the actual transfer of the ANS from the Canadian government to the company. And it began back then with the realization that the old system was failing. It was failing to keep pace with the demands of modern commercial aviation. And in that respect, there was a unique consensus because all of the key stakeholders in the air navigation system were unhappy. Transport Canada, the Canadian government department that operated the ANS, was constrained at that time by government-wide fiscal constraints. Customers, the airlines, including the pilots, weren't happy with that constrained service, obviously. There were restrictions and delays. Employees were also frustrated with inferior technology and severe wage restraint. Canada's serious fiscal situation at that time was an important element in generating the political will to deal with the problem and generate the consensus for change. And so as a result, the stakeholders came together and the private sector non-share capital model was born. And the core of this stakeholder-driven model, and we are a stakeholder-driven organization, has not changed in 20 years. And what also has not changed in 20 years is that since the beginning at NAV Canada, we have fundamentally understood that safety is not only our first priority, it is in essence our product. We're regulated by Transport Canada in respect of safety. Of course, we're also subject to the investigations by the Transportation Safety Board in Canada. But in addition, internally, we have our own Office of Safety and Quality with a Vice President of Safety reporting directly to me. And indeed, our board of directors has an entire committee devoted exclusively to safety. Consistent with this overriding safety mandate, we're a not-for-profit entity. So any surplus revenues that we obtain are reinvested in the system or used to pay down debt or reduce our charges to our customers for our services. So we have no motivation to make profit at the expense of safety. The early promise of NAV Canada was severely tested, frankly, by some very serious external challenges over the years, some of which are familiar to all of you. Of course, began with the closing of airspace on September 11, 2001, and the diversion of some 238 American-bound flights to Canada. The 9/11 attacks brought on a major aviation industry downturn, which was made worse in Canada by the 2003 SARS outbreak, exacerbated by some industry bankruptcies. And then just as things were starting to turn around, we had the financial crisis and the Great Recession beginning in 2008 with another downturn in traffic. But through all this adversity, our people did not waver. They established an early lead in modernization of the system, and today we believe that we operate one of the world's most advanced and modern air navigation systems. While there's always room for improvement, service delivery in Canada is, we believe, considered leading edge. For instance, Controller-Pilot Data Link Communications, CPDLC, has been successfully implemented in domestic high-level airspace with rapid adoption by controllers and pilots. Since 2012, the number of domestic CPDLC messages has grown to well over 500,000 per month. And of course, we've had CPDLC in oceanic airspace for some time now. We believe we also provide this service in a very cost-effective manner. Starting September 1 of this year, with our most recent rate reduction, our customer charges are going to be lower than they were when we introduced them on a full cost recovery basis in March of 1999. You compare that with the rate of inflation, which since 1999 has been well over 40% cumulatively. We have not only absorbed all of the inflation, but we've kept our rates at that level from 1999. This reflects our third rate reduction since 2006, and this time we're able to offer our customers $150 million in savings over 2 years through a reduction in base rates of 3.9% and a temporary one-year reduction in addition to that of 3.7%. But of course, not only do we focus on the finances from the beginning, safety has been the common thread that links everything that we do. So since 1996, when you look at our record, we have cut the rate of IFR to IFR operating irregularities per 100,000 movements in half. Our current 5-year rate stands at 0.72 per 100,000 aircraft movements, amongst the lowest for major air navigation service providers worldwide. And at the core of this record is our dedicated and skilled workforce. They're the people who work with all of you to deliver safe and efficient air transportation in an industry where everyone takes ownership of safety. At NAV Canada, it begins with each employee, extends to our teams and units, and rolls up through the entire company. We take the lead with respect to organizing and bringing together stakeholders around safety. So in one example, NAV Canada is responsible for organizing and running the meetings of the Runway Safety Incursion Prevention Panel, or RSIP. This panel, which meets 3 times a year, involves airlines, pilots, airport managers, ground handlers, the regulator, and many other stakeholders. And in addition to the discussion of analytical insights, such as a recent normal operation safety survey at a major tower, RSIP has also mounted campaigns to raise awareness of runway safety. This has included communications material for air traffic services, pilots, airport personnel, and others in the aviation community. ELPA is an active member of RSIP, and your expertise is very much appreciated. ELPA also plays an important role in the Canadian Safety Officers Partnership, or KSOP, which has a broader safety focus and which we have meet regularly to address a wide variety of industry safety issues. Interactive panels such as RSIP and KSOP are national in scope and of course involve airlines and many organizations with global responsibilities. 2 other efforts worth mentioning include the Air Transport Operation Consultation Committee, bringing together our major customers to discuss technical and operational issues, and the Air Navigation System National Advisory Committee, involving a broader group of industry stakeholders in regular meetings focused on the delivery of ANS services. Many other similar initiatives are regional or local, driven by our management and professional staff across the country. Beyond these initiatives, we see more and more participation at our air operation consultation meetings held regularly in each of our flight information regions. And although not exhaustive, this list demonstrates that collaboration and connections, especially around safety, are built into our DNA. As we all know, safety challenges continue to evolve, and we must all stay focused on finding new and better ways to identify, manage, and mitigate risk. And at NAV Canada, an important element of our safety management system is our annual corporate safety plan. This plan defines how we will continue to strengthen safety management across the Canadian ANS. For instance, we're working closely with Transport Canada on new regulations to address the safety issues associated with RPAS, and the transport regulations are scheduled to come out in 2017. Another example is the progress we continue to make with our new NAV Canada Safety Information System, which will replace the multiple information sources we have today. This investment by us of many millions of dollars in the safety information system, once implemented, will enhance our ability to access accurate, timely, relevant, and comprehensive safety data. It's also going to strengthen our ability to share information and enable us to gain new insights and apply lessons learned. Another NAV Canada safety initiative is focused on enhancing communications through a new series of online phraseology guides. So in the past year, we developed and launched the first of these for VFR pilots flying in Canadian airspace, and the other two guides in this series will address communications with IFR pilots and with ground vehicle operators. Another way that NAV Canada enhances safety is through the development and application of new technology. Three key areas of innovation for us have included our Canadian Automated Air Traffic System, which is our national flight data processor, with important safety features such as medium-term conflict detection, looking out 20 minutes in advance to detect and avoid possible conflicts. The continuous evolution of our Gander Automated Air Traffic System, most recently in collaboration with our peers in the UK, NATS, and the development, deployment, and international sales success of our Tower Terminal Automation System, now found in many of the towers in the UK, other places in Europe and around the world. But beyond these areas, we've also modernized virtually the entire Canadian ANS, from voice switches to new ILSs to our just completed aviation weather system upgrade. And as you all know, access to timely and reliable weather information is critical to flight safety, especially in Canada's northern and remote regions. And our weather systems upgrade was a massive undertaking, replacing all 68 of our old automated weather observation systems, expanding the network to 23 sites across the country. The project also included the replacement of old analog weather cameras with digital versions and their continued expansion to many more locations. As a result, there will soon be digital weather cameras at over 200 airports and VFR routes in Canada, and we've also upgraded all of our 176 human weather observation systems. We've introduced a limited weather information system as a key safety backup in many locations throughout the north. In total, since 1996, at NAV Canada, we have invested well over $2 billion in technology, systems, and facilities to modernize our system. But of course, the need for modernization doesn't stop, and so we are now entering a new phase, beginning in fiscal 2017, which starts for us in a couple of weeks, with a 3-year, $500 million capital program. Through this program, we'll move to the next generation of business systems, we're going to make needed facility upgrades, and we're going to invest in new air traffic management and surveillance capabilities. The next major advance will be the shift to space-based ADS-B to be available on a global basis. We will make this shift through Aireon, our joint venture with Iridium Communications, and with our partner ANSPs, ENAV of Italy, the Irish Aviation Authority, and Naviair of Denmark. Aireon surveillance will be especially welcome in airspace over the world's oceans and remote regions, where it will deliver significant safety and efficiency benefits. And while this is a new innovation, a new way of providing the service, it uses proven technology, automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, that has already produced results through ground-based systems in Canada and, of course, elsewhere. But despite these efforts with ground-based ADS-B, as of today, only 30% of the world's airspace is subject to air traffic surveillance, and that's going to change. When the Aireon ADS-B payloads are in orbit on the Iridium NEXT constellation of 66 low Earth orbiting satellites, the remaining 70% of the world's airspace will be visible for the first time. So we're investing in Aireon, but we're investing not only in Aireon itself, we're also investing in making changes to our procedures, systems, and technology. And much of this work is focused on upgrading our oceanic air traffic management capabilities in conjunction with, again, our peers in the UK, NATS. We also expect to incorporate SATCOM voice into our ATM systems, allowing for global communications to complement and augment global surveillance. The result of all this will be a significant expansion in airspace capacity, with opportunities for significant savings due to more efficient routes and altitudes. And in fact, we anticipate total customer savings in the North Atlantic alone of about 125 million liters of fuel per year. On the manufacturing side, all 81 of the ADS-B payloads have been produced and tested here in the United States by Harris, and the first 10 Iridium satellites carrying the Ariane payload are scheduled for launch this fall, with subsequent launches to follow. We anticipate that Ariane's surveillance service, along with the expected improvements in the North Atlantic air traffic efficiency, will become a reality in 2018. And that includes our commitment with all of our Ariane partners to also offer airline locating and emergency response tracking, or Ariane Alert. This service will be offered to the aviation community at no charge, providing global coverage, GPS location, and real-time tracking data to assist rescue coordination centers in emergencies. Through a 24/7 communication facility operated by the Irish Aviation Authority, Ariane Alert will determine the precise location and flight track of any ADS-B-equipped aircraft in distress. So as we approach 2018, we see momentum building. Thus far, Ariane has signed data services agreements with ENAV, the IAA, NATS, NAV Canada, Naviair, the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore, South Africa's Air Traffic Navigation Service, Curaçao's ANSP. 8 additional contracts are under negotiation, and MOUs have been signed with 11 other ANSPs, with more to come. Ariane is a great example of how innovation can enhance safety and efficiency on a global scale. Even more, it demonstrates how progress is driven by what I talked about earlier at the beginning of my speech, by connections, collaboration, and partnerships, which is why we are all here today. So to take a quote from Ashley Vance, the biographer of Elon Musk, Vance wrote that Musk believed the very idea of America was intertwined with humanity's desire to explore. Together with our employees, customers, and partners, NAV Canada shares in this desire to push the boundaries of the possible, and that includes the ongoing collaboration with SpaceX in the launch of the Iridium Next satellite constellation and the Ariane payload. Our collective task as a company, as an industry, is to allow exploration like this to happen, while finding more and better ways for humanity to do so safely, efficiently, and responsibly. So thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to share a little bit of NAV Canada's story and some of our initiatives and some of the things we have done over the past 20 years and that we look forward to working on over the next 20. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, but happy to take any questions if anyone has anything they want to ask at this point.
Please join me in thanking Neil Wilson for taking time.